I'm Erica.
And I'm CJ.
And you're listening to the Her Podcast.
In today's episode, we're sitting down with Christine Elliot. She's the powerhouse behind Live Free Wellness and is all about helping women bounce back and embrace life after fighting cancer. Christine's story is a roller coaster of emotion. She went from facing down stage 3 breast cancer to tackling stage 2 lung cancer. And now she's here to share her journey from fear to fiery passion. She's all about guiding women to find their groove again. And her motto is all about restoring peace, faith, purpose, and resilience in everyday life after the whirlwind of illness. If you know anyone that has fought an illness before, including cancer, or even if you're just walking through something hard in life, this episode is going to apply to you in how to overcome, have resiliency. So make sure to turn it up and enjoy. So we're really excited to sit down with you today. You are an advocate and have been through some things in your life. And I think I just read just a few to name, just a couple. But I would love to open up the floor for you to be able to talk about some of the things that you've experienced in life, where you were at when you got a diagnosis, what was happening before that, and what that looked like for you.
Okay, yeah. Well, before I was diagnosed, I was kind of at the beginning stages of like what a typical life in your 30s is supposed to look like. The whole like get married, buy a house, have some babies. And so that was the plan. We got married, I believe like 8 to 11 months before. I've never actually looked at the total, but 8 to 11 months before my diagnosis. So it was really exciting. It was new. We were planning our honeymoon. We were planning babies. We had just been looking for a house during that process. We had started looking for a house, and we were going to start our life. So that was really the plan. And I was laying in bed one night, and when there is a tumor present, it will generally pull the tissue down. And so I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and so the tissue was being pulled in my left breast. And what it was is when I laid down sideways, normally as you do, the tissue moves to the side, right? And so for me, my left breast didn't move. And I was like, okay, that's not good. And so I instantly felt...
Erica's face.
Yeah.
She's like, hold on.
Tell me.
My boobs go all over the place. No.
She's like,
okay, so this
let's
is
do a
like,
test.
I'm just in... No online testing or on camera testing. But my question is, like, I know so little about
breast
cancer and like how to check myself and like what to do. How were you even like, my boob isn't moving the right way?
Okay, well,
or is this, you know it now?
Sorry, am I like
no.
getting ahead of it? I'm like, were you already like very aware of breast cancer?
No.
Okay.
So it was craziness. So here's the thing. So like in our 30s, we aren't checking our own breasts. Like we all know about October Breast Cancer Awareness Month, which we didn't really know much about 5 years ago, but it's really catching, which is good. And we've heard of people who have had it, and we definitely know people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s that have it. But in your 30s, you're not checking your own breasts. I wasn't. You know what I mean? And should we? For sure. But I was not. And it was only when it got to the point where it was pulling the tissue down and away, like it was visible in the mirror, and I didn't notice because I wasn't looking. And so it was the fact that I was laying on my side. My husband said something from across the room, and I looked across the room, and I was like,
wait a second.
Wait a minute.
What's she doing down there?
Yeah. like that's not normal. And then I instantly felt, and there was a lump. And so had I been checking, I would have noticed, because the lump was like gumball sized at least. And then like when
and hard
and rock hard.
Okay.
And not moving and all the things. And so there was like the actual tumor size ended up being 7 centimeters. But the hardened speculated tissue was 2.5 centimeters or so.
Okay.
And so, so I felt for the lump, and yes, it was there. And I instantly was like, this is breast cancer. Like, and I mean, I guess it's not good to catastrophize, but it was it was so large. It was so stationary. It was pulling the tissue down. There was all these things. And even though I knew nothing about breast cancer, I was still like, this has got to be breast cancer.
Were you like immediately like WebMD, Google?
Oh, that's immediately where my mind went. But my husband was very like, just go to like, it's probably nothing. Like, there's nothing we can do about it. Like, so we had this conversation and he fell asleep. As
you
they
did
do.
not?
No.
I'm going to guess.
No, I did not. I stared up at the ceiling and I cried. I went through my whole life. I went through, the things that I was happy I did, the things that I wasn't happy. I pictured my husband without a wife. I pictured saying goodbye to my family. Like, it was the darkest.
And you didn't even have a diagnosis yet.
That's right.
Oh man.
Yeah. It was the darkest night. And it was, but it was just too irrefutable. Like, we should be checking our breasts for 1 centimeter lumps or like, if something's changed, but this was a tumor and I knew it. And so like, it was a tough night. Anyway, fast forward, I woke up in the morning, I called the doctor right away and said, I need to get in. And she felt around and she was like, yeah, it's a bit big. She's like, but it could be a cyst. So let's just, let's not worry about it. And that helped. And I was grateful to her for that. And so then I went for a mammogram. And while I was at the mammogram, they were like, we need more tests. I'm like, oh, that's not good. And so we did more tests and then they needed more tests. I'm like, oh, that's not good. And it said right on the wall, it was COVID. And it said right on the wall, the radiologist will not come in. And then the radiologist came in. And I'm like, And so you'd think by now, like, I'm kind of prepared because there's been some time that's passed. But the first words out of his mouth were, it's not benign.
Yeah.
And like, I don't remember anything after that. Like, it was like everything went dark. And I just remember he spoke for a while. I don't know what he said. I remember there was a nurse. She looked choked up. And I remember wallpaper. And that's it. Like, it was it was a tough moment. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So
and you were all by yourself because it was COVID.
That's right.
Oh,
yeah. So your husband wasn't there with you.
No.
Oh my gosh.
So he says it's not benign.
Yes.
What happens next?
So he said, we'll like, I think he said something along the lines of like, we'll get in touch with you, And so I go out to my car. There's a parking ticket.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah, I know.
Healthcare, man. It gets you in your worst times.
I know.
Did you pay that?
I did, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I would have been like, I would have just been like, I just found out I have breast cancer. I will not. That's my payment.
Yeah.
I will not be paying. I'm not saying you shouldn't. It's good you paid it. You're better the person than I am.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's when I started crying. Before that, I was pretty numb. But yeah, so that was, it was quite the experience. From there, it was a flood. So there was blood tests, there was a needle biopsy, there was scans, there was everything, like anything that you could think of. It all happened so fast. I would say like within 2 days, I had 12 appointments.
Whoa.
It was wild.
I thought you were going to say 2 weeks.
Well, and I think possibly a common misconception from what I've witnessed, and I don't know if this is true for everyone, but they're like, we're going to call you. And then they like call and then it just like happens so fast. Right? Like everything moves quite quickly.
Oh, it was so quick. And I mean, like, I'm not sure. Of course, my only frame of mind that I have is COVID. And so like, I know a lot of women really had to wait, but I was at the beginning of all of this. So I don't know if like for that reason I got in really quickly, but yeah. So it was scan after scan after scan. And the process of actually finding out that it was cancer, that it was, this size, that we were going to get started with this process, all of that took about a month because they had to send things away and all that.
What stage?
So I was diagnosed stage 3. They didn't know if it was stage 4. So it was kind of like, we can't give you a clear staging yet because it's in your lymph nodes. It is 7 centimeters. It's moved. We need more tests. Yeah. Is kind of it. And so like, for the listeners that don't know, like stage 4 is not, it isn't a death sentence, thank God. And nowadays it isn't. It used to be though. And so everybody always thinks when they hear stage 4 that like, this is the end. And I remember thinking that is that like, if it's stage 4, it's the end. And so like, that was to add insult to injury. It's not, you don't just have breast cancer. It's just like, you're probably going to die. And that was my thoughts at the time. And, so we did all these tests, and then there was the question of fertility. I had to ask myself the question. We were trying to have babies at the time. Thank goodness it didn't work. And I had to ask myself the question, what am I going to do? Do I want to do frozen embryos? Do I want to do IVF therapy? Do I want to take a chance with chemotherapy? Maybe my ovaries will come out unscathed, but generally not. And so those were big decisions that you had to make in and amongst all of this.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's a piece sometimes people forget about, is not only are you trying to decide like maybe course of treatment on how I'm going to stay alive, but also I now need to be thinking about, if I stay alive, what did I put in place while trying to figure out how to stay alive that's going to make my life better once I do survive?
Right.
That's a lot.
It was a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. And so we ultimately did decide to do embryo preservation. So it postponed chemo, but we decided to do IVF. So they take the embryos, or they take the sperm and the egg, and they make embryos, and then they freeze them. And so I have 2 little babies, just frozen and waiting for me, and I love them so much.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, I know, it's so crazy. Sorry.
No.
But and so they're just waiting, and so then we had to go forward with chemotherapy. And so the plan was 5 months of chemo, then a surgery of some kind, whether that be a mastectomy or a lumpectomy. And then there was 20 days of radiation.
Can you just quickly clarify? A lumpectomy is just the lump.
That's
just
right.
taking out the growth.
Yes.
Mastectomy?
Mm-hmm.
Both? Or is that like double, single?
It depends on you. So what the doctors prefer you to do is a unilateral mastectomy, because why would you take a perfectly good breast? That being said, sometimes there is a genetic factor like the BRCA gene, where they'll recommend taking both because your chances of recurrence are really high. Other times women will just opt for a double mastectomy. And most of the time they really do, because they're kind of like, if you're going to be cutting me up, like, let's just not have this come back is really the idea.
Okay.
And so, yes. And so that was the original plan. Now, of course, things morphed and changed along the line. Originally, I was told with the size of tumor, my chances of losing my nipple are really high. My chances of like needing a mastectomy are going to be really high. And so we just went forward. And I decided for myself, with chemo, I wanted to put in integrative medicine. So at the same time, I did naturopathic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard about this.
Yes. And it was so special to me, because prior to cancer, as you do, you kind of ask yourself, what would happen if I got really sick? And I always thought, I hate the medical model. I wouldn't do it. That's not what I would do. And so I was diagnosed, and they're like, here, we can save your life if you take our drugs. And so then it was this question of like, where are my morals? Where are my values? Where am I going to sit? And so the first thing I did is I contacted my naturopath, who, like, again, at the time, I believed way more in NDs than MDs. And so I called her and I said, what do you think I should do? And she said, I think you should do both.
Yeah. Because this is in tandem, right? Like together.
Yes. And so I was like thrilled at that idea, because I didn't know how to wrap my head around it. But when someone I trusted so much said, this is a good idea, I was like, all right, let's do it. And so that's exactly what we did. I did, throughout the whole process, I did vitamin C therapy twice a week. I did hyperthermia once a week, mistletoe injections and supplements alongside my chemotherapy, my surgeries, and my radiation.
Was your MD staff aware that you were doing the holistic approach? And was that something that was like respected for you? And did you find that it like was it a constant thorn to have to explain yourself? Like, what was that experience like for you? Because I think we're going to have listeners who are sitting here being like, I have this thought. What would I do? I have a naturopath, but I also like believe in modern medicine. And how do I bring those together? And I'm curious what your experience was.
Absolutely. So I was actually really fortunate. My oncologist was trained in the UK. And so the UK, Germany, like all of these different areas in that area of the world, they really believe in integrative medicine. And so when I told him, hey, I want to do this, he was like, you know what? It can't hurt. So he was really relaxed. I was
awesome.
Really fortunate. Yes. The cancer pharmacy, however, they fought me tooth and nail. And so, I mean, and I'm not recommending this, but I started lying. I started saying like, nope, no, I'm not doing vitamin C. It's fine.
And we do not condone lying, but no,
yeah.
I'm totally kidding.
But at the end of the day, you got to do what's best for you.
And
That's
advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the important part.
Yes.
Okay, so then what happens?
Well, so since I believed in these things so much, I did both of them at full force, and I really believed that they were like that. This combination was healing me, and it took a long time for me to get my mind wrapped around the medical model. But I would do things like meditations when the chemo was being administered, and I would picture the medicine like being like little like sparkles that were washing away the tumor and those sorts of things. And like, so I really practiced what felt right to me. And in the end, in the 5 months of chemo, my 7-centimeter tumor became 1.2.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It was so good.
Wow.
Yeah. So okay. And my oncologist like nearly jumped out of his designer shoes. Like it was.
I love that addition.
Yeah.
Here for it. Hey everybody, it's Erica. You guys know I love a quality handbag, and I recently found a luxury resale company that I have to share with you. Working Girls Boutique offers a stunning selection of gently loved luxury handbags and a safe, reliable, and secure way to purchase your dream bag. They have a strong commitment to authenticity and choose carefully curated pieces in excellent condition, which include Prada, YSL, Louis Vuitton, and they have a stunning Chanel collection, which is 100% on my dream list. One thing I love about Working Girls Boutique is how seriously they take making sure each piece is authentic. Ensuring authenticity of luxury items is a serious business, and Working Girls Boutique prides themselves on thoroughly checking every item they choose to the highest degree. They even use AI technology so you can feel super secure about the bags you are investing in. Working Girls Boutique also offers a flexible payment plan so you can secure your dream bag without breaking the bank. Plus, you know, they gave us an exclusive discount code for the Her community, which is amazing. It's code HER50 to save $50 off your purchase. If you're like me and constantly looking for that next dream bag to add to your closet, you can find all the details on the newest designer additions on their Instagram at Working Girls Boutique, and head to their website, wgboutique.com, to secure your dream bag. Don't forget to use the code HER50 for $50 off your purchase, and 100% make sure to tag me because I want to see what bag you snagged.
Yeah, he was so happy. Like, and he was just like, I can't believe this. This is what we call in the medical industry an extraordinary result. Mm-hmm. And so it was really exciting. And again, I to this day believe that is why. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the right way is. I don't know what the responsible or medical way of doing things are. And I definitely would never claim to say that I think that I did it correctly, but I did it for me. I did my way, you know, and it worked. And I don't know if that's belief in my way or if it's that the integrative medicine is effective. I'm not sure which one.
Amazing. He jumps out of his shoes. This is like incredible. We're all very excited, right?
Yes.
Then what happens?
So then at that point I got a choice. So it was a choice of whether or not I wanted a lumpectomy or a mastectomy. And so I chose lumpectomy. It just felt right for me because of breastfeeding. So at this point I'm starting to get a little more hope that everything's going to be okay. And so for me, I wanted to be able to have that choice when I have babies. And so lumpectomy seemed right to me. So that's what we did. However, along all of this, and this is where it gets kind of complicated, when we were checking for stage 4, we found a nodule on my lung, on the lower lobe of my lung. So it was actually almost directly behind the left breast. And so we're like, okay, what's going on here? And so when it was going through chemo, it was getting smaller. And when I stopped doing chemo, it was getting bigger. And so that's not a good sign. So we did tests. We did a biopsy, but it was attached to the kind of to the ribs, so we missed it. And then we did a PET scan, but it was too small, and so it didn't show up. And at this point, they were kind of like, it's probably nothing. But I was checking my own scans. I was noticing that it was getting bigger. And so I got really fired up, and I just said, like, you need to do something about this. Like, it's changing. And so my oncologist, who is wonderful, was like, okay, like, if you're really disturbed by this, we'll send you to somebody and you can discuss it with them. And so he sent me to a surgeon who was same kind of like pretty nonchalant. He was like, it's probably nothing, but like, if you want me to do it for you, I will. And so I opted for this really extreme surgery because of an intuition that it just didn't seem right. And so 30 days after my lumpectomy, I went in for a lung resection, and that was definitely way worse of a surgery.
Okay. I mean, I can imagine, but why?
Well, because I mean, it depends on the person, but like the lung is really, really sensitive, and it can have a collapsing effect when you bother it like that. And so what ended up happening for me, and everybody is different, of course, but one, the pain medication didn't work very well. I broke out in a rash. And then the second is that for whatever reason, that spasming made it so that when I woke up from like this sleepiness, that I couldn't breathe. And so when you can't breathe, and that's just a basic human thing to do, it remains to be one of the harder memories of mine.
Yeah. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's really hard.
Right. So they send away the sample. I begin to heal from all of the surgeries and start to prepare for radiation. And then I get a call from the surgeon who tells me, he's like, it was cancer. You were correct. But what's crazy is that it isn't stage 4 breast cancer. It's stage 2 lung cancer. So I actually had, yeah. Erica's looking at me like, what? I actually had 2 cancers at the same time.
Okay. Do you know probability of that?
I don't.
Like, what are I'm not trying to be goofy here. I'm like, what are the chances? I'm very curious. So if anyone actually knows.
I don't know the probability. I do know it happens because when your body's in a cancer state, it can let through other cancers that may, yes. And so that may happen. And so my oncologist was, yes, surprised, but also he had heard of it before. But what was really interesting is I got thinking about it after the fact. If I wouldn't have had the breast cancer on the left side, and if the lung cancer hadn't developed on the left side, I don't know that we would have found it. Oh, I know.
Which is the wildest thing when one thing leads to another.
Yes.
In this awful, serendipitous, but so important way.
Yeah. And, you know, and I really chose in that moment to say to myself, like, this is a blessing in the sense that, I mean, you know, breast cancer saved my life in the sense that lung cancer is, you know, you don't notice it until you're coughing and sputtering. And that's usually when it's too far. Mm-hmm. And so go ahead.
I'm interrupting you. I'm so sorry. Because would a stage 4 lung cancer diagnosis be? Like really, really dark.
It's dark.
Yeah.
Yes. Is it possible to come back from? Absolutely. What we have now in science and in belief and in integrative medicine and all of these sorts of things, there's radical remissions all over the place. However, that being said, a stage 4 lung cancer diagnosis compared to a stage 4 breast cancer diagnosis is very different.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. My stepdad, actually, he passed away from a stage 4 lung cancer diagnosis.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, with all of that and all of that fear, I definitely spent 5 months, you know, facing that Grim Reaper in that sense. Like, where I was like, what is going to come of me? Like, is this stage 4 breast cancer? And so when the doctor said, this is stage 2 lung cancer on its own, it was this lease on life. It was like this, like, oh my goodness, like my breast cancer in essence is saving me from lung cancer. Like I don't have an incurable disease, or as they call it, a palliative care disease. I have this opportunity. And so like that shook me. That was a big moment. That was like a defining moment, I guess, to say like, I'm here for a reason.
And is it at this point that you're like, I need to start sharing? Mm-hmm. That's what happened then? Because I always wonder, I'm always curious, because we come along across accounts like yours that are like, I shared my journey, and I'm like, but I think I'm not sure. I think how I would handle it, like, I'm like, I'm already on a platform and I'm already doing my thing. I'm like, oh, would you think like I should be sharing this right now? Or does that come later when you've had a realization or a moment to be like a new lease on life? So I'm curious how that happened for you, that you were like, it's time to start sharing my story.
Yeah. So, well, it started off as, a very small profile with just a few people, friends and family. And so for me, I was beginning to share for the purpose of not having to call my grandma and my aunt and my uncle and all the things. And so then that's what I initially started with. But what happened after as some time went, and I did share throughout chemo too, is that it started changing. I don't know who I was speaking to, but I just felt so called to talk about these things from less of like an informing perspective and more of from a, how can you transmute and alchemize what's happening to you in your life? And so I was really drawn to that. And when everything happened, when the oncologist said like, you're going to be okay. That's when I was like, okay, all right, I'm already educating and inspiring. I'm already feeling like this is something that I want to do. I'm going to do more of it. And so then I got a little more serious at that point.
And what was the response from community?
It was extraordinary. People started messaging me and saying that, you helped me get through X, Y, and Z. And sometimes it was cancer and sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes people were just saying like, how inspirational, or I really needed to hear this today, or something like that. And so I got really fired up and excited about those things. And then one day I was in my radiation appointment. I don't know what it was, day 15 or something like that.
And this is still for breast cancer, or this is for lung cancer now?
I know, that's like, isn't it crazy?
I know. So, I was like, I want to make sure I like,
I'm
like, I want to know the timeline, or like what's happening here.
It was more both, because they were both on the left side.
Oh,
so all they did was extend
both.
the beam a bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to be like, nice. Well, that's nice, but I'm like, it does feel like almost simple.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yes. And so I was coming to the end of my active treatment, and like, we'll talk about this more, like there's certainly an active treatment and an after treatment, but I was coming to the end of my active treatment, and this woman messaged me and she said, I just passed you in the hallway in the cancer center and I feel like I just passed a celebrity.
Oh,
It was the cutest thing.
That's amazing.
That's sweet.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was really flattered, of course. But what mattered was that she said, I just want you to know you helped me with my journey, and that I've been watching you and you've helped me. And so then that's when I was like, okay, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. Like I'm going to help people get through pain, because I was so impactful. Christine. and yet she saw me as something, as a leader.
Yeah.
And that was the moment that I was like, no, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to stop living small, because, and it's kind of corny, but like, you almost die and you're like, well, I'm going to stop living small.
Okay. Quick backtrack, because obviously this is a moment for you where you're like, I'm going to do this. And I'm just interject, but I'm assuming you're like, this is now what I'm going to do with my life. Like, this is what I'm going to do. You obviously had to take leave off work, like when all this started. Because again, actually I was going to say this right at the beginning, when you're like, oh, within like 2 days I had 12 appointments. I'm like, what the heck happens to your job?
Yeah.
What happens? And this is my, never going through this. Like, life just becomes all about this, right?
It's insane.
Yeah. In the beginning, it really does. It really does. And so I actually called my boss and I just said, like, this is going to be my experience. And she was like, yep, you can stop tomorrow. Like, she was so good. She's like, you can come back whenever you want. No worries. No rush.
Okay, that's incredible.
It was.
So you like have this enlightened, I don't want to say enlightened experience. You have like
an epiphany?
Yeah, I'm like an awakening. Like I'm trying to find the right word.
That's a good word.
Well, I'm like,
awakening.
an awakening of like, this is what I need to do with my life. I want to hear about that, but I want to also hear what you just said about active treatment and then after treatment.
Yes. Yeah. So your active treatment is like, it's your chemo, your surgery, your radiation. And then what a lot of people don't know about cancer is that, you get this, you ring the bell, right? So you're at the end and everybody wants to have a party for you. But you're like 5 minutes ago, you were a cancer patient and now 5 minutes later, you're supposed to have the energy of a normal human. And
that takes so long to come back too and is not talked about enough.
That's right. It is. It's so slow. It's such, and you have to give yourself so much grace. You're tired. You're kind of at your wit's end. And you kind of lose that fight or flight response that got you through that year or whatever it is that you have. For me, it was a year. And so now you're extra tired because that fight or flight is gone.
Well, and I imagine you crash.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I crashed hard. And then up and above that, I still had every 3 weeks, I had injections for another 6 months. I started an after chemo regime. So it was a chemo, but you don't lose your hair. I did that for 6 months. I started medications that I'm meant to be on for 5 to 10 years. Like there is an after treatment, like it just keeps going, right?
Well, it doesn't just end, right? And I think that it's a misconception that it just ends and you ring that bell and yay, back to normal life. And it's not that way.
That's right.
Well, and my misconception or my idea, I think that I have about cancer is that once you have cancer, you always have cancer because they talk about remission.
Right.
And I'm like, but how long are you in remission before you're now not in remission? Or are you always in remission? This is me just asking the Erica questions in my head, which is like, I'm curious about.
They're good questions.
They're simple, but I'm like, if I'm thinking them, someone else might be too. So I should just ask them.
Yes. So they do say remission because the idea is that it's a chronic disease. So they do say that once you have cancer, you always have cancer. That being said, there are a ton of people who do not ever have a recurrence. And so I've always kind of viewed remission as like I am, there is a remission of this disease as in it is not present. And that's always kind of how I've viewed my remission. But yes, they do call it a chronic disease to answer your question.
Okay. And so I'm curious about how you were, because this is like in your first year, like you said, you weren't even married a full year when this happens. What has your married life looked like at this point?
Ooh, that's a big question.
Is that okay that
no,
I ask that? I'm just like,
a great
you can
question.
say pass if you want.
Only, and you don't have to get into it, but I'm like, I'm always curious about the support systems that we need when we're going through something like this. And I mean, maybe you want to speak about your hubby, maybe you want to speak about someone else, but I'm like, what was your support systems like? Hey friends, it's Erica here. As you may know, my family and I recently sold our house and bought the family farm. And now we're living in constant renovations, and that's just a whole nother story for a different day. When we decided to move, I was not looking forward to walking through the process of selling our home. You can just ask Nick about it. I was dreading it. But then I met Lacey. Lacey Cassette is an award-winning Saskatoon realtor who prides herself in being your one-stop shop for both buying and selling. She is super passionate about helping her clients find their forever home, and honestly, it shows up when you meet her. Lacey was fun, energetic, listened to our needs, and when the time came for negotiations, well, I'm just really happy she was in my corner. With over 12 years in the industry and a 98% list-to-sale ratio, Lacey finds the best individual approach and plan for her clients, including extensive and personalized market strategies. And we all know that is more important now, more than ever. Along with her husband and partner, Kyle Berneski, Lacey is licensed in residential, commercial, and farm. So she literally has you covered no matter what real estate area you need. And she has built solid and long-standing relationships within the industry so she can dial up the best lawyers, mortgage brokers, appraisers, contractors, whatever you guys really need. If you want a driven, hardworking, and connected agent who will go above and beyond for you, this is a no-brainer, my friends. Get in touch with Lacey. You can find her at Realty Executive Saskatoon, on socials at Lacey Cossette. That's at LACEYCOSSETTE, and online at laceycossette.com. And don't worry, friends, we will link all of her stuff in the show notes in case you're driving and you can't click right now.
You know, honestly, it's a great question. It needs to be talked about more. So in regards to my support system, like it was COVID, so it was really difficult. I didn't have anybody around. It was quite lonely. However, with what my family and friends could do, they were extraordinary. Like they threw a big GoFundMe because of the naturopathic treatments. I could not believe the response. We thought like maybe we'll get $10,000, but no, like it was like in the 35s. Like it was extraordinary. And people just said like, how much do you need kind of thing. And it just poured and poured and poured. I got cards, I got letters in the mail, I got gifts in the mail. Like people did anything that they could do within COVID times. And so, yes, it was very lonely, but it was amazing to see the outpouring of love. I don't know that I realized that I was important to so many people, which was really cool.
So now that you've are on this side of it, right? Because you're here now. And how long have you been in remission for?
I have been officially in remission for 2.5 years.
Which is amazing. I don't know. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yes, right?
It's beautiful.
Right? That's so perfect. I feel like our room color is perfect, actually, for you. Yes. Right? What are you doing now with all of this? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
About where all of that, because this is such a beautiful picture of something dark, something ugly, something that we're like, is this the end of life? And instead, it's really breathed life into what you're doing. And oh my gosh, you had lung cancer. And I just said, breathe it in. Look at that.
Beautiful.
Look at that. I didn't even plan that, everybody. Just happened.
I love it.
Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. So I have so much to say about that. I'm curious if you want me to circle back to the husband though.
Oh yeah.
Oh, right.
Because you didn't say anything. I was like,
oh yeah, no, there's a lot to say there.
Yeah, go for it.
So when it comes to caregiver, the caregiver, they do not get enough attention, support, nothing. I had GoFundMes, I had friends, I had letters, I had all these sorts of things, and counselors chucked at me. And then my husband was left to be this strength for me. And he did an amazing job with what he could do. That being said, he struggled so much and had no support. And men, as we know, just are not allowed to feel, to have the emotions that they do physically have. And so he really struggled a lot. He did his very best and he did a great job. But what ended up happening is that he pushed everything down. And then after my remission, I've never seen him so low.
Yeah.
I was going through a lot. Truth be told, I wasn't very, I couldn't give him what he needed. There was a couple of times that he kind of bid for me to see, how you do, how can you help me? And I was kind of like, I have enough on my plate. Mm-hmm. And looking back at that now, I have a fair amount of guilt for it. But he struggled for a very long time, more than me. He looked sicker than me.
Wow.
It's the truth, and so I think it's really important that we remember the caregivers. If the listeners have a friend out there right now, call the caregiver too, see how they're doing, because they really struggle. Cause think about it, with anyone listening, your children or your parent or whatever else, how helpless you would feel if they were sick and there's literally nothing you can do. And then you add on being a man, which they're always a fixer, and there's nothing they can do.
Well, I think about it. I heard this thing once from one of my friends, and it was called, she referred to it as secondary trauma. And she was like, in the hospital so often, we all focus on the person who's sick, rightly so. We're all like, keep them alive, keep them alive. How do we save them? But we forget that the next people out are watching that and are experiencing it from such a place of helplessness that and then this person gets better and life's, and they've still experienced that trauma and actually haven't, maybe, like you said, no one's throwing counselors at them. So while someone, and I'm saying you because we're in this instance, right? Like you're like, okay, I've been able to work through my stuff because I've had counselors. We've forgotten about these individuals who are like, I walked through this silently and without, people noticing and I feel like the flip side is, because I experienced this with my sister after my sister had her experience in the hospital and I was whatever part of that. I was like, I can't talk about my trauma. It didn't happen to me.
Right.
Well, now you have guilt on top of trauma.
Yeah. Trauma
right?
and guilt. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to remember the caregiver, to remember, to check in on you when you were watching your sister, on my husband when he was watching me, because it is a lot. It is a lot of helplessness, and helplessness is a painful thing to go through. We've all felt it. We've all gone through it.
So if you were to give advice to our listeners who are a caregiver or who are witnessing someone being a caregiver, what would you say is like a tangible thing for them to do?
Oh, it's so clear. You absolutely need an outside source that you can speak to, and it should be a counselor. It should be one that you love, one that you trust, one that feels correct for you, but that you can say, like, I'm mad, I'm angry, I feel sorry for myself, because it's just, there's so much pent up there. And I've seen it in my husband, and that he just did not get a chance to talk to anybody because, he didn't believe in counselors, because as you do,
yeah.
and all these sorts of things. But I think that it's just a really tangible, really important thing to do is the moment that somebody in your life is diagnosed with something and you have to be the caregiver, you need to find an outside source that you can be raw and real with, because you're going to have guilt over the words that you say.
I really appreciate that you've spoken to that and that you came back to it with my other question there.
Yes.
So then going over to how you've used this in your life now with what you're doing, with what you're sharing, with what you're coaching. Mm-hmm. What does that look like?
Mentoring.
Yeah.
Well, so when everything was done, there was that letdown, like you spoke to. There's this idea of like it gets really the trauma comes in, and now you have to deal with it. And so that's kind of when the counselors go away. That's kind of when the gifts stop coming in, the letters, the phone calls, the people showing up with food, whatever it is that you had. That's when it gets quiet. But that's usually when all of the trauma comes back in. And so I saw a very severe lack of help for that, and lots of support for patients in active treatment. And so it was in the second half, the latter half, that I decided that that's really where I wanted to focus my time and energy. I certainly have lots of free supports for patients, but you're in this kind of fight or flight response. You don't necessarily have the faculties, and not everybody, but generally you don't necessarily have the faculties to take a course or to get a life coach.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but in that after effect, when everything dies down, that's when there's a really important need for somebody who has been through it, somebody who can say, like, I know where you are, and have that support. So that's where I decided to focus my attention. And it has been such a beautiful thing to watch the same story, that these women come in and they say, like, what the hell just happened? I don't know why I'm so sad now. I wasn't sad during. And to say, like, you're not the first. This is so common. And to be able to go through that process together and help them to recultivate who they are now, because you are different. And as much as when you're diagnosed, you don't ever want to be different, you are. But that's not a bad thing. You're stronger, you're more apathetic, you're more sensitive, you're more grateful for breathing, for life, for, you have the highest highs and the lowest lows during cancer. And those highs are higher than it was prior. Like there's something different about you now. And I think that becoming a support for those women, and helping them to access the greater side of themselves, the things that they did learn, and to really channel that into this new version of them has just been a blessing from above.
Well, and what are some of your big encouragements or tips or, tangible things that you encourage people to do, once they're in remission, or on the flip side, you've talked about helping people through their pain, right? Mm-hmm. And things that you would suggest to help people walk through that.
Yeah. So my process is basically what I do is it's a lot like a transformational coaching program that you'd find anywhere, but it is tailored specifically to the survivor and from a survivor's perspective. But the idea is I take them through a 10-step process. That process it really goes through, what have you learned? What just happened? What are the lessons that you want to take forward? And then we move into, what are these, what were the limiting beliefs that you had before? What were the traumas that you had before? How can you transmute and alchemize everything that happened for your better good? And then we move on to how can you create a life that you really want? How can you channel and turn, how do I describe it? How can you, there's a word for it, alter ego. Who do you want to be now? And so we go through alter ego work, like who do you want to be on the other side of cancer? And then finally, how do you integrate it? And so it's a 10-week process that I go through with survivors. And it is a transformational coaching program in its essence that's been tailored to survivors. And what ends up happening for most of these folks is they generally, when they come out the other side, will say like, this was about so much more than cancer, because it is. Like when you go through these traumas and when pain strikes like this, you have to make a choice. And so I guess this is a tangible tip is how can you, there seems to be a path, do you want to make it help you become better or bitter? And I think that if you ask yourself the correct questions and you get really curious about how can this make me better? Where's the lesson in this for me? Who do I want to be now? When you begin to ask yourself those questions, you can certainly become the better and not bitter version of yourself.
Yeah, that's so good. Better and not bitter. I feel like you've kind of already touched on this, but I'm curious if there's anything that you missed in this element of any misconceptions when it comes to breast cancer, chemo, radiation, and even remission.
Mm-hmm. I think a huge misconception is that it is this awful thing that, is only ever going to be bad and you're going to be broken afterwards and all of these sorts of things. As with any trauma, yes, it is inherently bad that bad things happen to us. Divorce, the loss of a child, trauma, abuse, cancer. These things they're not good things. I'm not saying that they're good, but I'm saying that every single person that you have ever met who went through a trauma will always say that there's something good that came out of that. And you can take that good and you can blow it up 10 times the size, but that's a choice that you have to make. So I guess the common misconception that I would say about cancer is that it is 100% a bad thing. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. Do people lose their lives? Absolutely. Is it bad? Yes. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that how can you take your experience, whatever it is, and help it to launch you into your purpose, into your version of who you want to be. Become unapologetic. Take every day like it's the absolute last day You know, how can you look at a sunset differently? You know, love your lover in a different way that you have before, you know, and all of these things. I think that's one of the biggest things that people forget when it comes to trauma, because we kind of get stuck in our victimizations, and of course we do. Bad things happened, right? And you're allowed to feel it. And I'm not saying to spiritually bypass those things and to never feel the sadness of those things, but certainly how can you, once that period has passed where you felt it, how can you now say, all right, what can I learn from this? Who can I become as a result of this?
So how do you live unapologetically?
Well, prior to cancer, I wanted everyone to be happy. I was very, very careful to not show up really big. I didn't want to be, if someone complimented me, for example, I was kind of like, oh, thanks, you know, but I really love your sweater. You know what I mean? For example, deflect.
Yeah.
And so like, there was this feeling of like never wanting to be big. And so even though I had this deep yearning to help women and to show up and be, you know, big in my community, I was too scared that I might make someone not feel enough and you know, truly I didn't feel enough. And then, so now in this new version of me, you know, kind of Christine 2.0,
Alter ego.
The alter ego. Yes, absolutely. Her name is Scarlett.
I love it.
Thank you. You know, I got used to saying no, like, God, this became my mantra. Like I nearly died. Like if I want to go up and sing karaoke, I'm going to go sing karaoke. You know, if I want to wear the red dress, I'm going to wear the red dress. If I want to feel like $1 million, I'm going to do it. And so what was interesting is what I thought would happen is that people might be like, oh, she's a bit braggy. She's a bit full of herself. But what ended up happening is that so many people came up behind me and said, like, your permission that you give yourself to be your goofy, weird, you know, over the top, emotional, oh my gosh, I'm so emotional self, and just like be raw with it is giving me permission. And so that's just been,
which I think
so
that we
cool.
don't realize, you know, how much us giving ourselves permission gives others permission to also be themselves.
And yeah, you know, so it's just been a blessing, really. And a lot of people are like, how can you say cancer is a blessing? For me, in my version of my story, it was.
And, you know, I think that's important. And I think you're right. I think we're all writing our stories and we're all able to share it. And I do think there's nothing in this world that can't be used eventually in some format for good, whether it's for everyone else or just for yourself. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you wanted to say on this topic, like while you have the mic with us?
Just to let anyone know who's struggling with really any sort of pain, any sort of trauma, that you are not alone, and that it's really important to find people who have gone through what you've gone through, who have also lifted themselves up in some way, and to access those people, to ask for help, to connect, because I just really think that community is the number one thing that lifts us out of our funks when we're feeling low. I mean, COVID taught us that, right?
Well, we're not meant to live alone.
No, we're not.
Like, we're not. You can look in histories. We're not meant to be alone.
Yeah.
Amazing. Christine, this was so good. I loved your energy. You're so much fun. I'm wondering, we like to always ask this question, which if you've listened to some of our episodes, you might know, but what is the best piece of advice that you've been given or that you like to give?
My best and favorite piece of advice to give, and when anyone calls me with any kind of trauma, is absolutely 1000% believe that you are enough to get over this and get through this, and that you have everything inside of you that you could ever ask for. Be that badass, because you are.
For our listeners who might not follow you, but now they're going to and want to get connected with you, and they're listening to this and they're like, I need this. Oh, what did you call it? A 10-week transformation coaching program. And are like, I need to go do that. How can they find you and get connected with you?
It is at live.free.wellness on Instagram is the main profile that I utilize. You can also find me on Facebook, same idea, at live.free.wellness coaching. There's a little bit on TikTok, and then my website is livefreewellness.ca.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us and our community. We really appreciate it, Christine.
It's been a true pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us on this episode of the Her Podcast. If you want to follow along with us, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at its.her.podcast. We can't wait to see you there.